You are listening to One Nation Under Crime, a historical, chronological true crime podcast. Each week, we go through our nation's history and discuss one case from each year, starting in 1800. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Leah. That's a big sigh.
I know. Well, our first Patreon episode has come out.
It has.
It has.
Our exclusive. For the cool kids.
And what's super funny is me and my boyfriend started watching this new show on Netflix that's like super creepy. But in one of the episodes, I can't say what the topic is, but they mentioned our topic and I was like, I was like, I know him. I was like, I know what that is. And
it's not a show that I watch.
No, not at all.
Kayla was talking about it today at work, and I was like, "Yeah, this isn't a show that I would watch, is it?" She was like, "Absolutely not."
But it's so. If anybody else is watching Archive 81, let me know.
I love how you take care of me.
I mean, I try, honestly.
I do appreciate it.
I did need to know, did your husband let you listen to the...
He hasn't listened to it yet.
Okay.
He's been working a lot of overtime, so he hasn't listened to it yet.
Well, I guess people need power. Whatever.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well,
I'll keep you posted.
Find out. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, this week's episode is... Our nation's funny. That's what I'm going to say.
Oh, dear.
There are some things that happen in our history that I could not stop laughing at some of this.
You mean like the dead squirrels floating down the river?
I mean like presidents doing crazy stuff, like hilarious things that happen, and how you don't realize who's connected to what and where at what times until you start looking into it.
Oh, dear.
So, guys, we're going to get into it. One of our sources is going to tell you what our episode is about, so that's why I'm just going to wait. Our sources, NPR, felt super smart. Smithsonian Magazine, always a good one too. I really like that one. They have really good articles about a bunch of different things, and usually they're kind of long. And then this was I think like a dissertation study. And it is titled The First Presidential Assassination Attempt. And it was written by Howard Zonana.
Oh. Like
banana, but Zonana.
Gotcha.
And MD. So I guess he did get his MD from his dissertation. But so we are covering the first presidential assassination attempt in the United States. And guys, notice that I said attempt. So nobody dies.
Was not successful.
Nobody dies.
Yay, no murder, no dying.
So, but...
However...
This case, it took some turns and some hilarious things that I was not expecting.
I like laughter.
So, we will get to it. Our events in 1835, on January 8th, the federal government declared that Andrew Jackson paid off the national debt for the first and only time. The U.S. debt was $0 for the first time and only time in history. And this is in the time of President Andrew Jackson, like this said. So just keep in mind,
that was a long time
he's
ago.
The other side of our story is Andrew Jackson. And so we're going to talk a lot about Andrew Jackson.
Okay. Stonewall.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. February 24th, the Shawnee Sun was established as the first Native American language monthly magazine. March 3rd, Congress authorized a U.S. mint in New Orleans, Louisiana.
We talked about that.
Mm-hmm. May 6th, James Gordon Bennett Sr. published the first issue of the New York Herald, and it was 1 cent. We will discuss him in next week's episode, too. I did not realize that.
Interesting.
Is May 8th, The first installment of Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales were published in Denmark. I know it's Denmark, guys, but still.
I mean, it's Hans Christian Andersen.
Can I give you a fun fact?
Tell me. I always love fun facts.
And it's tied to Frozen. So do you know this fun? I hope you don't know this fun fact because I
don't
want to be.
know.
I saved it specifically to tell you on the podcast.
I will have to let it go.
Okay. The names of the people in Frozen. So it's Hans Christian Andersen,
Mm-hmm.
Hans Christoph Anna Sven.
I did not know.
I know. I was listening to, and that's why we drink. And M on the show did something, and they in some tour that they went on said that, and I was like, what?
I love that.
So the name's Hans Christoph Anna Sven. Isn't that fun?
Love that.
I love little
so
Easter
much.
eggs like that.
Oh my goodness. Olaf is my favorite, by the way.
He's funny. So, all right, on to the next. May 13th, the foreign embassy was formed in Hawaii. The first foreign embassy, that is. And June 2nd, P.T. Barnum, we talked about him.
We know him.
I know. As a showman in New York City he started his showman tour in New York City by displaying Joyce Heth. We discussed her. He's the one that said that she was 161 years old and the nursemaid of George Washington, and it was all a lie. And
it was a big old fat lie.
And he charged people to watch her autopsy. It's garbage. Anyway, June 25th.
People delight in being snookered.
Here we are. June 25th, the first building was constructed in Yerba Buena, now San Francisco.
I'm sorry, what was its name?
Yerba Buena.
That is quite a name.
Isn't it? July 4th, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad completed construction of its Thomas Viaduct, which was then the longest bridge in the United States and second only to the London Bridge in the world. The longer Canton Viaduct was completed 2 weeks later. So for 2 weeks, they were
for 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
You know the viaduct that the Hogwarts Express goes on that's in Scotland?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it in person. I've been there. You're welcome.
It's very cool. July 8th, the Liberty Bell cracked again.
I was going to say first time or...
July 26th, the first sugarcane plantation started in Hawaii.
Hawaii.
August 17th, Solomon Merrick patented the first wrench in Springfield, Massachusetts. A wrench.
Patented the wrench.
Like literally people use it every day. That's so crazy to me.
I wonder if he is a relative of John Merrick.
I don't know.
You know who that is?
No.
The Elephant Man.
Oh.
I know that because of Bare Naked Ladies.
Such a good band. August 25th, the New York Sun published. We'll talk about them next week too. Weird. The New York
Bare
Sun.
Naked Ladies?
No.
Oh, I was like, really?
No. The New York Sun newspaper published the moon hoax story about John Herschel and the supposed discovery of life and even civilization on the moon. The articles described animals on the moon, including bison, goats, unicorns, bipedal tailless beavers, and bat-like winged humanoids. And they built temples.
Oh, my.
There were trees, oceans, and beaches. These discoveries were supposedly made with a, quote, immense telescope of an entirely new principle. Eventually, the authors announced that the observations had been terminated by the destruction of the telescope. By means of the sun causing the lens to act as a burning glass, setting fire to the observatory.
Oh, my.
But they were publishing all these stories about this light, and people were believing it.
Were they smoking some special backy?
They might have been, but yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Bipedal tailless beavers. That is... As Patrick Hines says in True Crime Obsessed, that's my drag name.
That is horrible.
bipedal tailless beaver.
And bat-like winged
Oh,
humanoid creatures.
Oh, God. And they built...
my
okay.
heavens, they
All
built
right.
temples. I mean, I've heard that a cow jumped over the moon, but I did not know that bison lived on it. Heavenly days.
Oh, gosh. All right. I can't. It's my drag name. Oh, gosh, guys, I can't.
That's good stuff right there.
November 24th, the Texas Rangers were authorized by the Texas Provisional Government. December 3rd, the first U.S. Mutual Fire Insurance Company issued its first policy in Rhode Island.
Huh.
December 16th, fire consumed over 600 buildings in NYC and killed 2 people.
That had nothing to do with the fire that burned
Doesn't
appear.
Doesn't appear that way.
Okay.
I mean,
I was just checking.
Look, that could have been the excuse. I'm just saying it would have worked out well for them.
Start that fire.
You know what? You know what it was? The bipedal tailless beaver came down.
Oh,
he moved.
He says you cannot have any evidence.
Moved the telescope.
I got you.
It's like Armageddon. Like he sacrificed himself to come here. And he was like, I got to do it for the fam.
They can't know.
No. And then people are going to be like, that looks like a tailless beaver.
Oh, they can't know.
They can't know. So who knows? He could be walking among us still today. I don't know. I know some people who could be considered a tailless bipedal beaver, but whatever. All right. December 20th, the Texas Declaration of Independence was first signed. And our undated events in 1835, Fort Cass was established. It was the military headquarters and site of the largest internment camps during the 1838 Trail of Tears.
Yeah.
Say it with me. Because people are garbage.
I tried to harmonize.
It's all right.
It didn't work.
I never do it the same way. So you never know. It's always a surprise. All right.
I need you to do better.
I'll try. I won't. Our births in 1835. We're just skipping right to June. So June 15th, Ada Isaacs Menken. She was an American actress, painter, and poet. She was
very artsy.
Oh, just you wait.
Uh-oh.
She was the highest earning actress of her time and most known for her performance in the hippodrama, I think it's Mazeppa, that featured her riding across the stage nude on a horse.
Was she Lady Godiva?
I don't know.
But gas.
She was a Gemini.
Heavens
quite
to
scandalous.
Betsy. Very scandalous.
June 27th, Frederick Henry Harvey, he created the first restaurant chain in the United States called Harvey House.
Well, there you go.
He has a cancer.
He had cancer?
He was a cancer. I don't know. Some people could describe me. Anyways.
Cancer's not a joke, though.
No. Which is unfortunate that I have to. Anyways. August 2nd. Let's see. Dang it. I knew I was going to do this.
What did you do?
Hold on. Be right back. All right, I'm back. I figured it out. August 2nd, Elijah Gray was born. He was an American electrical engineer who founded the Western Electric Manufacturing Company. Some recent authors have argued that Gray should be considered the true inventor of the telephone.
Oh.
Because Alexander Graham Bell allegedly stole the idea of the liquid transmitter from him.
A thief?
Although Gray had been using liquid transmitters in his telephone experiments for more than 2 years previously, Bell's telephone patent was upheld in numerous court decisions. Gray is also considered to be the father of modern music synthesizer.
Ooh.
And was granted over 70 patents for his inventions.
Wow, that's a lot of inventions.
He's a Leo.
I bet he was a very interesting
I would
fellow.
think so too. He seems it. Oh gosh, I forgot about this last name. November 21st.
Oh, it's right in the face.
Oh, by the way, Elijah Gray was Leo.
You said that.
Maybe I did. November 21st, Rose Edinge That's what we're going with. She was a Jewish American actress, and she was thought to be the first American actor to ever earn a 3-figure salary.
Ooh.
She was a Scorpio.
I like the name Rose.
You'll know this name. November 25th, Andrew Carnegie.
I do know that name.
He's a
Scotsman.
He's a Scottish American industrialist and philanthropist.
I wrote a paper on him in 11th grade.
Carnegie led the expansion of the American steel industry in the late 19th century and became one of the richest Americans in history. Almost 90% of his fortune was given away to charities, foundations, and universities.
Yes.
He's a Sagittarius. You know this one too. Just saying. November 30th.
I know a lot.
Mark Twain was born.
I know about him. That's not his given name.
True. But he's an American
Samuel Clemens, I think is his given name.
American writer, humorist, entrepreneur, publisher, and lecturer. And he was, quote, the father of American literature. He wrote such books as The Adventures of Tom and Sawyer and Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. He was also a Sagittarius.
Tom Sawyer, not Tom and Sawyer.
Yeah, I said Tom Sawyer.
I thought you said Tom and Sawyer.
I don't know. Maybe.
We may have had libations before we started recording.
I've only had like 2 sips of a drink. What is going on with me? Anyways.
I have had more than 2 sips of a drink.
December 13th.
I'm mouthy.
Phillips Brooks. He was an American clergyman who wrote the lyrics of the Christmas hymn, O Little Town of Bethlehem.
That is such a pretty song.
And he was a Sagittarius. Now we are to our deaths in 1835. April 21st, we have Samuel Salter. He was known as the father of the American Industrial Revolution. August 25th, Anne Rutledge died. We haven't gotten to him yet, but it's said that she was Abraham Lincoln's alleged first love.
Oh.
December 22nd, David Hosick. Y'all know him. He was a physician educator, and he was the one who was the attending doctor at the Hamilton Burr Duel.
Oh.
And I just put in parentheses, Burr shot first. And then...
just in case.
Yeah, just in case. Anybody. Well, and then the date is unknown of this one. Okay. And I don't like that.
Yeah.
She's a woman who simply is known in a lot of places as Sally. Sally Hemings was an enslaved woman who had a not-so-secret relationship with Thomas Jefferson for years.
And she is mentioned in Hamilton.
She is. And her 6 children were fathered by him, which now has been proven by modern DNA technology.
Yep.
So, on to our case for this week, January 30th of 1835, Richard Lawrence attempted to shoot President Andrew Jackson outside of the United States Capitol, marking the first presidential assassination attempt.
Did not work.
No. The United States Capitol building, also called the Capitol or simply Capitol building, just in case, is the official meeting place of the United States Congress and the seat of the legislative branch of the U.S. federal government. It is located on Capitol Hill at the eastern side of the National Mall in Washington, D.C. We have discussed the building briefly in earlier episodes, but we're going to take a bit of a deep dive on it today. I'm sure we'll be back in D.C., but we did briefly talk about D.C. in episode 16 for 1814. So since this happened at the Capitol building, like it's only fitting that we take a specific look at her because she's gorgeous. Mm-hmm. She's gorgeous. That color looks so good on her. The building isn't at the geographic center of the federal district any longer, but it does form the origin point for the district's street numbering system and the district's 4 quadrants. It was originally completed in 1800. The building was partially destroyed by a fire in 1814, which we talked about in that episode 16, when the burning of Washington, D.C. took place. It took 5 years, but it was fully restored. But it was not the building that you know today.
Nope.
Prior to the Capitol building's completion, the U.S. Congress met in Philadelphia at Independence Hall and Congress Hall, in New York City at the Federal Hall, and several other locations between New Jersey and Maryland. New York City remained the home for Congress until July of 1790, when the Residence Act was passed, which allowed the assignment of a permanent capital. Everyone and their mother's grandmother wanted to claim the capital as their own. And thanks to Alexander Hamilton,
Yep.
in a room where it happened, a deal was struck. The federal government would take on war debt incurred during the Revolutionary War, and in exchange, the northern states would support locating the capital on the Potomac River. Part of this agreement included Philadelphia being the temporary capital for 10 years until the building in D.C. was completed. Pierre Charles Elephant, we talked about him, didn't say his last name right then either. He was the one. He was the one chosen to create the city plan for D.C.
Mm-hmm.
He chose Jenkins Hill as the site for Congress House, which is what it was called at that point.
Okay.
With a grand avenue connecting it to the president's house, which is now Pennsylvania Avenue, and a public space that contained a broader grand avenue, now the National Mall, leading straight to the Potomac River. Thomas Jefferson reviewed the plan and insisted that Congress House be called the Capitol instead. Capital with an O. The word capital was derived from Latin and is associated with the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on Capitoline Hill, which is one of the famous 7 hills of Rome.
Oh, I was thinking,
yes,
Optimus Prime.
I did too when I wrote it. You'll notice a lot of times that capital is sometimes spelled capital.
Mm-hmm.
For those who, this is not a visual medium. So capital with an O or capital with an A.
Mm-hmm.
The Capitol with an O is a building that houses the government institutions, whereas the Capitol with an A is an entire city itself. Elephant was dismissed in February of 1792 due to disagreements with President George Washington.
Oh, dear.
There were no official plans for the Capitol building itself at this point. I just put, the ever overzealous Thomas Jefferson proposed a competition for designs, and a 4-month deadline was set. The prize was $500 and a lot in the federal city. 10 people submitted designs for the Capitol building and the president's house. They were called amateurish and crude due to the lack of architectural skill.
Oh.
The most promising.
Tell us how you really felt about it.
I know. The most promising came from Stephen Hallett, who was a trained French architect, but apparently not good enough for them.
Oh.
But his designs were too fancy, with too much French influence, and they were going to cost too much.
Oh.
A late entry.
But they were amateurish.
Apparently. Crude, I guess, is where they came.
Too fancy.
No. Insane. A late entry came from William Thornton, and it received a good bit of praise for its grandeur, simplicity, and beauty, most notably from President Washington and, of course, Thomas Jefferson. The design was approved 3 months later.
Quick question. Did Jefferson give it, approval after Washington gave it approval?
I don't know. It didn't say.
Because I'm just saying, but brown noser. Anyway, continue.
The design was approved 3 months later, and William Thornton served as the first architect of the Capitol. He was also later superintendent of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office because of him getting this job.
That's pretty cool.
On September 18th of 1793, President George Washington, along with 8 other Freemasons, dressed in Masonic regalia, laid the first cornerstone, which was made by silversmith Caleb Bentley.
That's pretty cool.
For several decades, beginning when the federal government moved to Washington in the fall of 1800, the Capitol building was used for Sunday religious services as well as for government functions. According to an exhibit called Religion and the Founding of the American Public, which was located at the U.S. Library of Congress, quote, "It is no exaggeration to say that on Sundays in Washington during the administrations of Thomas Jefferson and of James Madison, the state became the church. Within a year of his inauguration, Jefferson began attending church services in the chamber of the House of Representatives. Madison followed Jefferson's example, although unlike Jefferson, who rode on horseback to church in the Capitol, Madison came in a coach and 4 horses. Worship services in the house, a practice that then continued until after the Civil War, were acceptable to Jefferson because they were non-discriminatory and voluntary. Preachers of every Protestant denomination appeared. Catholic priests officially began in 1826. As early as 1806, a female evangelist, Dorothy Ripley, delivered a camp meeting-style exhortation in the house to Jefferson. Vice President Aaron Burr, and a, quote, crowded audience. The building was eventually enlarged with the addition of a massive dome and extended wings with expanded chambers for the bicameral legislature, the House of Representatives in the South Wing and the Senate in the North Wing. Like the principal buildings of the executive and judicial branch, the Capitol is built in the neoclassic style and has a white exterior. Everyone knows it. Everyone loves it. Both its east and west elevations are formally referred to as fronts, though only the east front was intended for the reception of visitors and dignitaries. We are going to get to something a bit creepy.
Oh, dear.
On the ground floor.
We're going so well.
I know, right? On the ground floor is an area known as the crypt.
Ugh.
It was intended to be the burial place of George Washington. We have talked about this before, but this goes into it a little bit more. It had a ringed railing at the center of the rotunda above, looking down to his tomb. Both houses of Congress passed a resolution calling for Washington to be entombed in the Capitol upon its completion.
But praise the Lord.
Martha Washington agreed to the plan despite the presence in her husband's will of a provision that he be buried at Mount Vernon. However, the original resolution was never carried out due to disputes over the specific design and the cost of the tomb, and the body was placed in a temporary tomb at Mount Vernon. Congress renewed its call to transfer the body in 1830, and it was after an attempt to steal Washington's head, in which the Mount Vernon tomb was vandalized and several of Washington's relatives' corpses were desecrated.
Ugh.
But the owner of the property, John Washington, decided to build a new, more secure tomb on the site.
So he is not in the Capitol building. Praise the Lord.
The crypt also houses exhibits on the history of the Capitol. A compass star inlaid on the floor marks the point at which Washington, D.C. is divided into 4 quadrants and is the basis for how addresses are done in Washington, D.C. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the crypt was used for bicycle parking.
Oh.
Today, the crypt serves as the main thoroughfare of the ground floor of the Capitol and is a stop for all Capitol tours provided through the Capitol Visitor Center. The crypt also contains the Magna Carta case, a gold case which held one of the copies of the Magna Carta when it was on loan to the United States for the bicentennial celebration.
That's cool.
I put, due to the pandemic more, you currently cannot visit the tour.
That was funny.
You currently cannot tour the Capitol building in person.
I was going to ask if they were doing tours right now.
However, you can do a live virtual tour with a tour guide. So you have a tour guide. The tour lasts 45 to 60 minutes, and not only does it have a live video, but there is also time built in for questions and answers from the tour guide directly.
Well, that's neat.
When the Capitol Visitor Center does open, all tours, programs, and activities are free of charge. In 1999, a study was published which looked into the psychology behind assassinations of presidents.
That's the year I met my husband.
Oh. Robert Fine, who worked with the Secret Service in the 1980s as a psychologist, and Secret Service agent Brian Voskuil, took it upon themselves to do the most extensive study of assassins and almost assassins that has ever been done. The idea came when Fine was working with the services in 1980s and President Ronald Reagan was almost assassinated by John Hinckley. And then in the years following, both Reagan and then VP George H.W. Bush were threatened more than once. Fine said, quote, in the space of 18 months, 4 situations came to the attention of the Secret Service. 4 in 18 months.
Mm.
In 2 of these incidents, he said, people with weapons and an intent to kill appeared at public events. In the 2 other incidents, the would-be assassins were intercepted before the events. Ultimately, all 4 cases were prosecuted. 2 were convicted and 2 were sent to psychiatric facilities. Though Fine says the government did not exactly advertise this.
Well, no.
Fine said, quote, these were not stories that hit the news, but they were situations that caused great concern for protectors.
Yeah.
So after these incidents, the Secret Service leadership got together and said, we really would like to know more about the behaviors of these people. 83 people were identified who were involved in a completed assassination and assassination attempts just from 1949 to 1996 alone.
You said 80?
1949 to 1996, 83 people.
Ooh.
Yeah. Fine and Voskuil decided to go straight to the source for information. Fine said they went with a very particular pitch. Quote, we'd say, we're here because we're in the business of trying to protect people and prevent these kinds of attacks. You are one of the few experts because you've engaged in this behavior. We would like to talk to you to understand your perspectives in your life.
Whoa. That cut right to the chase.
I know. The common finding was that, so this was very interesting. The common finding in the study was that choosing a political figure rather than a celebrity allowed the assassination to associate themselves with a broader political movement or a goal.
Okay.
This allowed them to psychologically see themselves as someone who isn't inherently bad because they are representing a larger cause.
All in all, helping.
Yes,
they're helping people.
All in all, the conclusion was that assassins are basically murderers in search of a cause, and they are using that cause to justify their murder.
Okay.
So they kind of piggyback off of each other.
Okay.
But what about mental health cases? Well, 44% had a history of depression, 43% a history of delusional ideas, 21% heard voices. However, a majority of the assassins were not, they say mentally disorganized, which I kind of like. They were not mentally disorganized by a mental illness.
Okay.
So a big majority of them did not have any mental illness,
Gotcha.
That comes up. The argument then became that someone has to be organized to attack a public official due to the high levels of security involved. So what does all of this boil down to? 2 things: notoriety and murder.
Yeah.
That's what the whole study ended up figuring out.
Yeah.
4 sitting presidents have been killed, and yes, we will get to all of them. They include Abraham Lincoln in 1865. What?
I'm counting on my fingers.
Abraham.
She thought I was giving her signals, like giving her the bird, but no, I'm counting.
They include Abraham Lincoln in 1865 by John Wilkes Booth, James A. Garfield in 1881 by Charles J. Guiteau, William McKinley in 1901 by Leon Czolgosz, not how it's spelled, I can tell you that, and John F. Kennedy in 1963 by Lee Harvey Oswald. And I just put in parentheses, maybe, but we don't have time to get into that now. Stay tuned. Anyways.
I love you, Kayla.
Well, there has to be a first for everything. And in 1835, President Andrew Jackson survived an attack on his life that was unprecedented and unexpected. Richard Lawrence was an English-American unemployed house painter at the time. He was born in England in 1800, and Lawrence immigrated to the United States when he was 12 years old, and the family settled down in Virginia. During his eventual trial, Lawrence was described at this time as, quote, a relatively fine young boy who was reserved in his manner, but industrious and good, reserved in his manner, but industrious and of good moral habits.
Okay.
I don't know about that. We'll see.
Later on in life, it took a turn.
Lawrence obtained a job as a house painter, and this is significant. By November of 1832, his behavior had changed almost instantly and without cause. He told his family that he was going to return to England, and then he left. However, he came back about a month later, saying that he decided not to travel because it was too cold.
Okay.
So where was he for a month? A month. He was just boop, gone.
Well, he was just, taking
he
the
just
scenic route.
He just left.
Decided he wanted to just, take his time coming back.
Oh, he never left the U.S.
Well,
just a month.
He just took the long way around. He just,
Well, his stay didn't last long, and he announced again that he was returning to England to become a landscape painter. This time he left.
Is that a profession?
I guess so.
Huh. Happy little tree over here. I guess Bob Ross did it.
Bob Ross. If y'all ever watched the documentary of that, hit me up. Do not buy anything that has Bob Ross as a label on it, because Bob Ross's family gets absolutely nothing from it. It's a whole.
So sad.
Watch the documentary. Anyways, he was apparently a sex symbol. Anyways,
oh no.
Oh, women threw themselves at Bob Ross. Anyways, so
I can't erase that. Anyway, continue.
This time he left Virginia and stayed in Philadelphia before going back home again. He told his family this time that, quote, unnamed persons prevented him from traveling, and the U.S. government disapproved of his plan to return to England.
The U.S. government disapproved?
And I just put WTF ... Last time I checked, passports weren't really a thing, and neither was carrying any type of identification. So how would the government disapprove?
I will say my mama almost got stuck in Scotland. She did. She almost got stuck in Scotland because it was just after 9/11. She went over and didn't realize that her green card had expired.
Oh, gosh.
Or something. I think it was her green card. Anyway, I don't know what. I don't remember what happened, but she really she was like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting home.
It was nice knowing you, fam.
She was really scared. And maybe it hadn't expired. I don't remember what had happened, but maybe it had. Anyway, yeah, it had expired. But she was like, I haven't gotten any notices because they stopped sending notices, I think. And now she has to go to Atlanta to do
crazy
stuff. She can't just go downtown.
That's so funny.
And the person finally was like, okay, I believe you, your license is not expired anymore, and your passport is not expired. So it does look like, get this taken care of as soon as you go home. She was like, I will. Yes, just I will.
Let me on the plane.
Yeah. Really, she really thought she was not going to get to come home.
That's funny.
It was bad. Okay, so continue.
Well, he continued with his story and said that while in Philadelphia, he read stories about himself in the newspaper that were critical of his plans to travel to England, and that the stories also attacked his character. So Lawrence had no choice but to come back home to his family and save up enough money to buy a ship and hire a captain who could sail him to England instead.
Oh, so he's just going to do it on his own self.
Even though Lawrence went back to his painting job once, he arrived back home and he quickly quit. Some historians believe that the exposure to toxic chemicals in the paints might have contributed to mental illness.
Make him crazy.
So if you thought that the story was going off the rails before,
oh dear,
buckle up.
Uh-oh.
Because Lawrence's sister asked him why he quit painting. That's a genuine question. Why did you stop painting houses? That's what you did as your job. Why, why are you not doing that anymore?
Because the paints made me crazy.
It's a legit question. And he said that he didn't have to work anymore because he was owed a large sum of money by the U.S. government.
Oh.
Not only that, but he was actually Richard III of England, and he owned 2 English estates.
Oh, bless it.
I put, now, if you have listened to this podcast up until now, and you've made it through all 38 plus episodes, because we did have bonus episodes.
Yes.
Then you are very well aware that we are very strong advocates for mental health.
Yes, we are.
We both have our own mental health things that go on. We know a lot of other people do, and we have a mission to destigmatize it.
Yes. I admit that I'm crazy. I just put it out there.
People don't like the term crazy.
Okay, people don't like the term crazy, but I know that I am crazy. I mean, I will just tell you.
Crazy in a lot of ways, though. I mean, like, let's be real. But yes.
I'm crazy awesome.
I'm just saying, some people don't like it, but I don't know what to say. Anyways.
Yes. Well, I mean, yes, you're right. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
But, so, I have no doubt that something was going on with Richard Lawrence.
Sure. Something's going on with him.
But I'm not a psychologist who can actually make a diagnosis of what that is.
Right. And we don't know if the paints had something to do with it. We don't know if there was something else going on in the inner workings of his brain. We don't know.
So, my unofficial diagnosis, what I think could have been going on based off of what we've seen, heard, what all has been going on with him. Schizophrenia.
That's what I was thinking.
Typically manifests itself in men in their early to mid 20s, but onset can occur between late teen years into your mid 30s. So, and typically your first episode occurs in your early to mid 20s for men.
I can't think of the name of the show, but my husband and I watched it, and it was Eric, I can't think of his last name, but Will from Will and Grace was the star in it. And Eric, I can't think of his last name. And he had schizophrenia, and he was a professor at a college. And you don't realize it at first, like he's talking things out with his best friend. And then you realize that she's not real. And she is one of his voices, one of his people. It is, and he's absolutely brilliant, and he actually helps solve crimes. Absolutely brilliant, but he does suffer from schizophrenia. It is one of
lives with schizophrenia.
I'm sorry, lives with.
See, guys, even we have to work on it.
Yeah, we do.
It's hard.
It is
because you have to remember, like, okay,
yes,
but yes, schizophrenia for men can have late onsets.
One of the best shows ever, and I cannot think of the name of it, but it was really neat, and it really does show you how the disease really does just affect your entire life, and like sometimes you don't realize that it's not real.
Yeah. And it depends on what type of symptoms you have as well. You know, a lot of people will have different symptoms, and a lot of different things. So I think it's a major possibility that this could be the explanation for it, but I also think the paint has something to do with it. Like you said, like it was very toxic paint. So I know that like that happened a lot. So back to Lawrence.
Eric McCormick.
Yes, Eric McCormick. He started to believe that he wasn't receiving the money that was due to him because of President Andrew Jackson's opposition to the Second Bank of the United States.
Oh, so it's all his fault.
Yes. He thought that if Jackson were out of office, then Vice President Martin Van Buren would certainly establish a national bank and allow Congress to pay him the money for his English estates.
Oh.
But Lawrence didn't just change on the inside either.
Oh, no.
His outward appearance started to change from a once conservatively dressed man to growing a mustache, buying expensive clothes, and flashy clothing. And he would change clothes 3 to 4 times a day.
That's pretty consistent with what would be.
He would stand in the doorway of the house and watch the street for hours in silence, and the children in the neighborhood started calling him King Richard.
Oh.
Lawrence liked the nickname, but he didn't realize that the children were actually making fun of him.
That is very sad.
At the same time, he became hostile to other people and extremely paranoid. He threatened to kill a maid because he thought she was laughing at him, and he also started verbally and physically abusing his family, specifically his sisters.
Oh.
One attack occurred when he threatened to hit his sister with a paperweight because he thought she had been talking about him behind his back.
Which she probably was, but probably to try to get him help.
At his trial, witnesses described some of the behavior occurring with Lawrence at this time. Some testified that he would have nonsensical conversations with himself and others, and he would break out into fits of laughter or have cursing fits. Everything changed when Lawrence started making note of President Jackson's movements. It was reported that someone saw him in a paint shop muttering to himself about Jackson. On January 30th of 1835, Lawrence was seen at the paint shop again. He had a book in his hand and he laughed. He suddenly jumped up and hurried away, saying, "I'll be damned if I don't do it."
Oh, no.
So we got to go back a tiny bit to President Jackson because we haven't really talked about him. And many people know Andrew Jackson. As we discussed in our New Orleans episode, there's a very famous statue of him there. Jackson was a lawyer, soldier, statesman, and he served as the 7th president of the United States from 1829 to 1837, 2 terms. He gained his notoriety as a general in the United States Army and served in both houses of the U.S. Congress.
Here comes the general.
He was a strong advocate for the rights of the common man against a corrupt aristocracy, and he wanted to preserve the union of the states. Here's some scandal. He eloped with Rachel Donaldson Robards in 1791. However, Rachel had been married to a man named Lewis Robards in 1787, and she thought that Lewis had already obtained the official divorce between them.
Uh-oh, she thought.
It was later revealed that he didn't, which meant that her marriage to Jackson was inadvertently bigamous.
Oh, no.
They were forced to remarry one another in 1794 after the divorce was officially finalized. The couple was extremely close, and even though the couple never had any biological children, they did have 3 adopted children. One was their nephew, who was coincidentally named Andrew Jackson Jr. That's why a lot of people don't know he's adopted, because he's Andrew Jackson Jr. I think it's Lincoya. Lincoya was an orphan from the Creek tribe. And sorry, guys, this is a little sad. He was found on the battlefield beside his dead mother.
Oh.
And Jackson took him in and took care of him.
Well, I mean, that is sad.
Yeah. And
but good for him for taking him in.
And he was raised just like his other children, and he actually wanted Lincoya to go to West Point, and they wouldn't let him in.
Oh.
Yeah, it was frustrating. Yes. And then lastly, Andrew Jackson Hutchings, who was the grandson of Rachel's sister. So, yes, it's very confusing. This was all. This wasn't all, though, because he served as the guardian for the children of Captain Edward Butler and the children of Rachel's brother's children. So confusing.
Wow.
Kids. I know. Emily Donaldson and Andrew Jackson Donaldson. While he did not live with the Jacksons at this time, Andrew Jackson Donaldson did go on to serve as President Jackson's secretary during his presidency. Sadly, Rachel died only a few days before his inauguration in 1829. And her niece, Emily Donaldson, who he helped raise, took on the duties of First Lady.
That's the one we talked about.
I know. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
He has a very sordid history that we do not have time to get into.
But he does seem to be a big-hearted man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Family man.
Yeah. He had a lot of things. We'll say this. So on June 8th of 1845, he was surrounded by family and friends at his deathbed. Jackson said, quote, "What is the matter with my dear children? Have I alarmed you? Oh, do not cry. Be good children and we will all meet in heaven." And he died immediately after.
Whoa.
At the age of 78 of chronic edema and heart failure. His reputation has suffered sorely since the 1970s, largely due to his anti-abolitionist views and policy of the forcible removal of Native Americans from their ancestral homelands. Ancestral. Apparently that's a hard word. However, surveys...
For some of us anyway.
Yeah, right. Surveys of historians and scholars have ranked Jackson favorably among U.S. presidents. Very interesting. I just put... However, Richard Lawrence would strongly disagree. So, on January 30th of 1835, Jackson was attending the funeral of South Carolina Representative Warren R. Davis at the U.S. Capitol building. Lawrence wanted to shoot Jackson before he went into the service. Really? You're going to shoot a man going into a funeral? Okay. But he wasn't able to get close enough. Once the funeral had ended, Lawrence found himself a spot next to a pillar on the east portico, right where Jackson would walk by. Once Jackson was in sight and passing by, I'm sorry. I know it's coming up and I can't. Okay. Sorry.
Compose yourself.
It's not, guys, you'll see why I'm laughing. So, once Jackson was in sight and walking by, Lawrence stepped out and fired his pistol at Jackson's back. It misfired.
Oh, dear.
Lawrence quickly tried to take another shot with his second pistol. It misfired.
Oh, no.
What Lawrence didn't know is that the weapons he chose were known to not work well in moisture in the air, and particularly that day it was humid and damp from rain.
No.
Sorry. I'm going to make it through this sentence. I can't look at you.
You can't look at me?
President Jackson saw where the misfires came from and quickly ran over and started to beat Richard Lawrence. He started to beat Richard Lawrence.
You want a piece of me, boy?
With his cane. Yeah.
You want a piece of this?
It gets better, guys.
Oh my
It gets
gosh.
better. The crowd eventually stepped in. They watched for a couple minutes.
I mean,
then they stepped in to intervene.
I would too. I'd be like, get impressed. Yo, get impressed.
The crowd stepped in to intervene and wrestled Lawrence to the ground. I told you guys it gets better. It gets better. One notable person in the crowd that helped subdue Lawrence was Representative Davy Crockett.
Yes! Davy Crockett!
And then it gets better because on April 11th of 1835, Lawrence was brought to trial at the District of Columbia City Hall. The prosecuting attorney...
Oh, is it Peg Leg?
...was Francis Scott Key, the man who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner.
Love it.
So the man who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner is the prosecutor of the man who tried to attempt to assassinate the president, who was also tackled by Davy Crockett outside of the Capitol building.
Who tried to kill Stonewall Jackson.
When I read that he started, I was dying laughing. Are you serious?
And then him with a cane.
And then in parentheses it said Representative Davy Crockett was in the crowd subduing Lawrence. I died.
Gosh,
my boyfriend goes, "Well, I guess he
of the wild frontier."
My boyfriend goes, "Guess he didn't need that cane, did he?" I was like,
I mean,
adrenaline does a lot.
Gosh,
so
that's hilarious.
During the trial, Lawrence would have wild outbursts and would rant about the proceedings, and he refused to recognize the legitimacy of them. He said to the courtroom, quote, "It is for me, gentlemen, to pass judgment on you and not you upon me."
Well, now.
The jury took 5 minutes to deliberate.
And found him not guilty.
And found him not guilty by reason of insanity.
I was being facetious.
Nope. In the years following his acquittal, Lawrence was held by several institutions and hospitals. In 1855, he was committed to the newly opened government hospital for the insane. That is what it's called.
Yes. Remember we talked about how language has changed.
Later, the hospital became known as St. Elizabeth's Hospital, and it is in Washington, D.C. He remained there until his death on June 13th of 1861, 26 years after the assassination attempt. There was some speculation that Lawrence was a part of a conspiracy. While nobody denied Lawrence's involvement, many people, including President Andrew Jackson, believed that he may have been encouraged to carry out the assassination attempt by the president's political enemies. U.S. Senator, and we talked about this in an earlier episode, Jackson's former vice president. Remember, John C. Calhoun stepped down as vice president, and there was not a vice president for an entire year. So John C. Calhoun made a statement on the Senate floor that he was not connected to the attack on the Senate floor. Nevertheless, Jackson believed that Calhoun was possibly at the bottom of the attempt. Jackson also, I think this has some weight to it. Jackson also suspected a former friend and supporter, Senator George Poindexter of Mississippi, who had used Lawrence to do some house painting a few months earlier. Poindexter was unable to convince his supporters in Mississippi that he was not involved in a plot against Jackson, and he was defeated for re-election. However, no evidence has ever been discovered that connected Lawrence with either Calhoun or Poindexter in a plot to kill Jackson. And that's the first assassination attempt of a president in the United States.
That was really
a wild ride.
Really, really unsuccessful. That ended with the president and Davy Crockett beating the mess out of him.
I mean, you can't get a better story than that, honestly. Like,
yep, I was beaten up by Andrew Jackson and Davy Crockett.
And then they go, well, I see why he's in here. All right. And just walk down the hall. They're like, he doesn't know what he's saying.
I took on Stonewall and the King of the Wild Frontier.
I mean,
same time.
Which, sorry guys, but unfortunately in the next episode, Davy Crockett dies. We don't cover it, but it's one of our deaths. We talk about it because the year after this is the Alamo. So one of the last fantastic things he did for the country was save President Jackson from Richard Lawrence. I don't know, could have saved Richard Lawrence from President Jackson, honestly, because
why you gotta bring me down, man?
I don't know what that.
Why you gotta bring me down?
I'm just saying, I don't know what that cane was made out of, but it might have been he was saving Richard Lawrence from President Jackson. Honestly, that's what I'm going with. All right, well, I don't know if you'll find wild stories like that, but you can find our website. You can. And any and all ONUC information you are looking for, it is onenationundercrime.com. If you don't know where to find us by now, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and Twitter, I don't know what you're doing.
I mean,
it's fine.
It's not fine.
If you love our podcast as much as we do, and we know you do, please follow us on your favorite podcatcher and recommend us to family and friends.
Please.
Also, leave us a 5-star review, 5 stars only. I have discussed this before, but I feel the need to discuss it again. If you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Yep. And discuss it with strangers, too.
It's fine.
Like in the checkout aisle, if you people are slow in front of you in the aisle or, waiting room.
Could be.
Wherever.
And as discussed at the beginning, we do have a Patreon. If you would like to help with the cost of hosting and making the show, just go to patreon.com/onenationundercrime. We appreciate you guys listening.
Hey, did I tell you that I discussed our podcast with people at Disney? Mm-hmm. I did. Mm-hmm. Our waitress, she wrote it down. Was like, I know. So I hope you're listening.
Maybe so. Hi, if you are. Thank you guys for listening to this week's wild episode of One Nation Under Crime. We will see you here. Same time.
Different crime.
next week. And remember, there isn't always liberty and justice for all.
Nope.
Unless Davy Crockett's in the crowd.
I mean,
goodbye.
Bye.